I'm just so overwhelmed, really. This morning, first thing, I was trying very hard to be at the front entrance of this fantastic building to welcome people as they were arriving, and I shook so many hands. It was just so lovely because everybody who came through the door was saying, "We can't believe we're here. We really want to make a difference. We want to make this work." And I'd be saying, "Where have you come from?" And they'd be saying, "Devon, Bristol, Wales, Newcastle, the whole country." I'm so delighted and so humbled, actually, to stand in front of you this afternoon. All of this because of a few tweets. Back in February, when clearly there was a sense that assessment was becoming overwhelming in of itself. And all of this conference is about, in my view, the reason we've got that hashtag learning first is because we need to put assessment back in its place. Of course, assessment matters. Of course, assessment is important. But assessment is what we do day in, day out, lesson in, lesson out, to make sure that our pedagogy is of the highest quality. And too often, assessment has come to mean something that we fear, something that is done to us, something that means we get our pay rise or we don't. So this day, this conference is about saying, what do we know about assessment? How can we build expertise? How can we tame it? How can we tame it so that we use it for a purpose that supports the learning of all our children? We've got a lovely, wonderful array of speakers in the auditorium this afternoon. We're being live streamed. So I welcome all of those people who are joining us today for this conference who couldn't actually be in Sheffield, because I really hope that this is the start of something amazing. This is about using the spaces that we have within the school day, within the curriculum, between the statutory windows of when we do statutory assessment, using those spaces to make things better for teachers, for children, to enable the curriculum to be broad, balanced, full of life, irresistible, and assessment used in the right place. So a flourishing of the arts, of course STEM, of course English, of course maths, sports, everything. Spirituality, the full breadth of what it means to be a learner is what we're thinking about today when we think about putting that assessment back in its box and taming it. So I'm going to welcome a series of speakers, first of all, who are going to come and share just for 5 minutes, and we're being incredibly strict because we've got so many people who wanted to contribute and we wanted to give a voice to today. They will have 5 minutes each, and I'm just going to introduce them now, and then we're going to thank them in advance. So we're going to hear in a moment from Mary Myatt, from Francis Child, and from Rob Webster. And after we've heard from them, there'll be a space to tweet, and then we'll welcome our next group of speakers. But can we, in the meantime, say, woohoo, thank you very much for our speakers.
Good afternoon, everybody. What a great day so far. 4 things I'd just like to contribute to this conversation about assessment. And just by way of introduction, any number or letter which is attributed to our children in the formal national assessments, we do need to bear in mind, I think, tells us something, but not everything, about what that child can do, and that behind every letter or number there is an actual child and their work. The first thing I'd just like to put to you is that I always think it's very helpful to go back to the etymology and the roots of a word, and assessment comes from the Latin for sitting next to, sitting alongside. And I think in our philosophy of learning around this, I think we would do well to hold that in mind. And a lot of what we've heard this morning is a real focus on noticing what children do and responding to that. And we can only really do that if we're working alongside them. Sitting in that too is the idea that it should be live. If I'm learning to ride a motorbike, which I did about 15 years or so ago, I didn't want to wait till next week to find out how not to fall off the bike. I wanted to be told there and then. And I think there's real messages in our working with children that it needs to be as close as possible to the action as is reasonable. The second offer I'd like to put to you is that we are a challenge-seeking species. We're a challenge-seeking species, and that we, as adults, and our children like doing things that are difficult. Children playing quite complicated games at home. We as adults doing things like Sudokus, crosswords and things at home. We're putting ourselves under pressure for the sheer pleasure of doing something which is quite hard and achieving. The critical thing underpinning that is its low threat. And so I'm arguing that we need to be providing really, really demanding stuff for our children, which is high challenge and low threat. The third point I'd like to offer is that I think we need to be thinking far more when we're assessing what children know, understand and can do, is thinking far more about a range of products that children produce. And that includes writing, but isn't solely confined to writing. And that what children say, what they actually make in terms of artifacts, how they respond, as well as what they write, can give us really interesting pointers for not just what they can do, but where some of the gaps might be. This has been really reinforced in the thinking behind the assessment without levels work, and Tim Oates, who's also been mentioned by John Thomsett in his session this morning. If you haven't seen his video, the DFE video of Tim Oates talking about the principles behind assessment and of the new curriculum, and essentially it's doing fewer things in greater depth and allowing our children to create products. So I'm arguing there bigger, longer, more robust pieces of work which really provide a sense of achievement for children. Interestingly, this debate has been going on for a long time, and I'm a great fan of Theodore Sizer's work. He was writing in the States in the 1970s and 80s. Great couple of books, Horace's Compromise and Horace's Dilemma. Really, really accessible books about the leadership of learning. Great, great reads. And he too talks about it's really imperative that we have big projects for children to demonstrate what they know, understand and can do. Nothing breaks my heart more than going into schools and nobody looks at what they produced because it's just a pile of stuff in some books and no one cares. We need to honour our children's work. The final thing I would say before I get flagged with the yellow card is that, and heaven help me if it's the red one, is that there's some really interesting work coming out of there to support some of this, particularly around giving children interesting things to do and testing them. Daniel Willingham's work on that do worth looking at his blogs and the commensurate work that is coming around it, but also some very interesting work coming out of Chris Whedon's work on no more marking. Daisy Christo and David Dida are doing some very interesting work as well. That we look at children's work and say, is this reasonable? Why is it reasonable? What are its brilliant parts, and what might the child also do to take it even further? So I think we've got some really interesting ideas to scope and to understand and to provide some real juice for our engines as we power on through this exciting piece of work. Thank you, colleagues.
Good afternoon. Again, it's great to be here. What an exciting Saturday we're spending together. I come from a fantastic role, which is to be a vice principal in the first secondary university training school in the country. So a huge honour in being part of opening a new school. When we're opening a new school, one of the things we've had to do is to make sure we stick to some really clear principles and don't repeat things that have gone before, which we can't justify. So I want to talk to you today briefly about learner-led reviews in a secondary context. I'd be interested to know how many secondary colleagues are here today. Okay, so we're in a minority. We were influenced by Alison's work at the Wroxham School that had been done with primary children, and getting learners to lead reviews of their own learning. We're a secondary school that's completely comprehensive and, this wonderful term, super diverse in every way. In setting up the way in which we use assessment in the school, we have stuck to key principles, and one of them is this, and that is that we cannot know what each pupil is capable of, so we're not going to put any ceilings on attainment. Now, in the early days of the life of the school, you won't be surprised, it's a brand new school. We asked our Year 7 pupils to tell us what they were dreaming of in their secondary school careers. And as I walked around classrooms on the first day in the life of the most beautiful and wonderful new school, again and again I saw on the desks of the children had been writing their lovely little cards with their dreams, and I found get a level 7 in numeracy and get a level 7 in literacy. And I was shocked by how often I saw it. I think now, less than a year into the life of the school, you'd find far more children saying they want to become a baker or play the cello or become a member of parliament, which would be really exciting. Before we started on our learner-led reviews, we needed to think about the learning journey that the children were on. And the way I would describe our planning for our learning journey is that we provided multiple opportunities for children to catch sight of excellence. They're in mixed attainment teaching groups. They can see each other at work and see all the wonderful things that each other can do. We work a great deal across the school in mixed year groups between year 7 and year 12. And we also make sure there are plenty of visitors coming in from the university, from employment and so on. So there are plenty of opportunities to catch sight of excellence. We started to develop our learning journeys in each subject to make sure the children are really clear about where they might go next and take this golden opportunity to make that a really ambitious and high quality curriculum which focuses on exciting input, not on measurement and tracking. And our pupils have now started to build amazing portfolios via film, audio and video on our VLE. So in February this year, they took part, all of our Year 7s, in an annual learning review. Rather than run the traditional parents' evening, we invited in parents, and they met with their form tutor, and they spent time preparing that learning review with their Year 12 peers. Now, Alison talks about making sure we allow children to surprise us. And one of our surprises was the degree to which the joint working between Year 7 and Year 12 was a complete highlight of this experience. Over 2 weeks during tutor time, pupils prepared their presentations, reviewed their learning and discussed their next steps with 1 or 2 Year 12 pupils. They made PowerPoints, they made posters, they made booklets to share with their parents. Some of those best outcomes are ones you don't plan, and the quality of an engagement in reflective dialogue between the 2 year groups took us completely by surprise. Every morning for nearly 2 weeks, around every corner and in every space, young people, themselves new to the demands of sixth form life and themselves just digesting new learning, were leading animated, probing, enjoyable, positive conversations with 11-year-old pupils. The message we were giving out loud and clear to our whole community was that assessment is built on dialogue with and between young people, proud of their work and working together to plan next steps, and crucially, that the assessment process itself is learning. I want to give you 2 quotes from one of our Year 7 tutors who herself admits to having been dubious about the whole project. Firstly, students didn't see this review as a one-off session. They now regularly ask to have their work photographed or recorded and uploaded to their portfolio. And finally, there was a really positive opening of a dialogue with parents. It was tutor, parents and child as a caring and supportive team rather than a reporting back session. In all reviews, children spoke about looking forward as well as reflecting. It was a snapshot of a journey rather than a retrospective. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues! Yes! Now we're friends. Okay. I've got 5 minutes and I want to use them to convince you of 4 principles that underpin what this is all about, and I'm going to stretch a metaphor to breaking point to try and do it. I've blogged about this. It's on the TESS website. Whoever's handling the TESS Twitter feed might be able to tweet that as I talk. Okay, it's all about punk. Okay, the principles of punk. Punk is a good metaphor for creating an inclusive assessment system. Punk catalysed a form of agency and self-determination through a DIY ethic, and it's all about championing the people who are underrepresented, who are marginalised. So in the context of schools, it's those who are most at risk of school failure. So I've got props, me. It's a good job I have, because we can't use that because of the old YouTube thing. And you can write your notes on the back. So, P, the 4 letters of punk, P-U-N-K, P, stands for purposeful and positive, okay? Now, the punks knew that just protesting something is insufficient to the job of changing it for the better. So, we know what the problems are with assessment, we know what it can lead to, the squeeze curriculum and so on. So, today, brilliant first step in tapping into this hive mind that we have in this room with these experts, teachers, researchers, system leaders, school leaders, to put forward a principled and purposeful alternative. It's no good just fighting, we've got to put something more positively framed in its place. Universal and unlimited. An inclusive assessment system is not a closed system. It respects and it sets out to capture meaningful progress for all learners in all kinds of forms. So we really open up what we talk about in terms of progress, development, and so on. And the part of the job of that is to put teachers as the empowered architects of that, the builders of the tools and the assessment methods and so on, and feeding back into the pedagogical approaches and how we organise the classroom and all of that kind of wonderful stuff. So we're responding and serving learners and serving learning. Okay. N, needs and names. This is where I'm coming from my inclusive SEN background. It's about learners, it's not about labels. It is, hey, I got a cheer from down there, fantastic, there you go. It's about Sid and Sid's needs. It's about Ellie and Ellie's needs, not these sometimes unhelpful labels like our pupil premium kids. It's also about adopting the learning without limits values. If you don't know about that, go and find out about it. Transformability, inclusion, trust, co-agency, and risk as well, giving ourselves the permission to take a chance to follow our instincts, let our learners follow their instincts, and the right to, as Alison puts it, the right to surprise us. And K, yes, I've had to spell it wrong, but it's punk, right? Punk was a movement that was informed by and influenced by other genres and cultural movements like ska and reggae. And they all had a common purpose, fed into a wider social change agenda. And you know, so it is in education. There's a whole army of people whose expertise we can tap into and represent all voices, all experience, all views, all interests are welcome. And we get that coherence through the alignment of those interests and those views and those voices. So this is about co-construction, building something together. My final thought, punk changed the world, okay? It was born out of a system that just didn't work for too many people, okay? The assessment tail has been wagging the pedagogical dog for too long, okay? As Alison says, time to put it back in its box. Make it work for us. My final thin punk analogy. There is a line in God Save the Queen, the Sex Pistols version, that says, don't be told what you want, don't be told what you need. Hold your nerve. We have heard a lot about achieving a school-led, self-improving system. Yes? Yeah? Well, be careful what you wish for. Thank you.
I'm not sure the co-authors of Learning Without Limits thought it was about punk, but never mind. Thank you very much. Fantastic contributions there from Mary Myers and Francis Child and from Rob Webster.